everyone, welcome to Paper Daisy Journals. It's Kylie. I have 3 journals to share with you today and they're all very pink. I will go into detail as to how I've put the cover together, and I do have a little crafty hint with one of the pieces of ephemera. Aside from that, I will show you the covers of each of the journals and then just do a flip through of one to keep the video short and interesting, because I have used similar things in each journal. I've named this one here Marilyn, this one is Molly, and this one is Maggie. So I will first show you Marilyn. So what I've done with the covers is I've created a patchwork style. So I've patchworked the front. The spine is from one piece of fabric, and I've used some of my antique glass buttons just to create a feature. And then the back is patchworked as well. So I've patchworked different vintage pieces of fabric together and vintage embroidered doily or tablecloth snippets. So there is a tactile feel to these journal covers. With the patchworking, I've just cut out a particular pattern, and you'll notice the pattern's the same for the covers on each journal, so the same sized patches. And so I've cut out the square cardstock and a piece of fabric probably with 1/2 centimetre or 1/4 inch allowance, sort of like a seam allowance. And what I do is I just glue the edge of the fabric underneath the piece of cardboard, so it ends up looking like this, but without the stitching around it, obviously. And that's just to hold it in place, so I don't use any glue on the front. I just glue the edge bits underneath. I usually cut the corners off as well, just so there's no excess fabric in that corner part where you're folding. What I do then is I typically pin the patches onto another piece of fabric. In this case, I did use a thick linen because I wanted a little bit of structure. You can create more structure with using a thicker cardstock if you wish, but then using a sewing machine or hand sewing becomes harder. So I used thicker fabric instead of really thick cardstock. And I've just zigzagged each patch onto the piece of fabric. Now the piece of fabric inside the cover, I have literally used one piece for the whole journal. So that's really what's holding it together in terms of structure, and then everything is sewn onto that one piece. So you can actually see the sewing underneath, but I've used the same coloured thread, so it's not very obvious. However, you could make that a feature if you wished. So that's sort of how I achieved that patchwork look. On the cover of Marilyn, I've got a really beautiful vintage embroidered flower. That was actually from I think it was from a handkerchief. And if you do use thin fabric, you can actually layer some fabric underneath it, so you can't feel or see the cardstock, if that is an issue for you. So yeah, so this is more modern. I think this is Liberty fabric, but I've also hand stitched some little hearts onto one of the patches on the front. I possibly haven't explained the patchwork concept very well, but that's probably the best that I can do at this point in time. Going inside the journal, I've just used some vintage wallpaper as a pocket, and I've just popped in an original postcard there. Each of them have one of these Belgian telegrams. I've layered up a card here, and on this card, tag, there's a little tuck spot there, so you can put something, secret if you want. As with all of my journals, I've used some vintage trim. That's a gorgeous heart. Ledger, There's lots of pockets to put interesting things. I've used wallpaper in tags, fabric pockets. I've used some bloom washi tape on the inside of the signatures, primarily to reinforce this fairly thin old school book paper, but I thought it was a really pretty feature as well. A wool cigarette card. I've used doilies on the middle of each signature as well as decoration, and I've actually used a little bit of fabric to decorate the little paper clips, and I've used a mini stapler to stick that fabric to the paper clip. So lots of layering. Little vintage glass beads, so each journal has one of those just hanging out the bottom. Another pocket there and there. I've also used book pages, vintage book pages, to make tags. An 1890s French document. All of this is handwritten. It's quite unbelievable actually, because you really feel like that's got to be printed somehow, and possibly it has been now that I look at it closer, which is a relief, because that kind of perfect writing seems a little odd. And I've used lots of trims, all very pink. As I said at the start, here is an old, it's like a, what's it called? It's like This Book Belongs To, and I think you would put a paste on the back and stick it into your book. I'm fairly certain this is German. And this is the tag, one of the tags that I've created, that I was just going to have a quick chat to you about. So another way of using all of your pieces, you can call them scraps, but if you're repurposing them into something else, they stop being scraps and they become pieces, as far as I'm concerned. So another way of using up all your pieces is actually to make a tag out of them. So all I've done is used some craft glue, and I've had all these pieces sort of laid out from my little stash, because you collect them, and then I literally just stick pieces of fabric or lace or quilt onto the tag, wait for it to dry, trim the edges, and then stitch around the outside and create a tag out of those little snippets. And this is a great way actually of using up fabric that you've used in a journal, because it sort of coordinates in with the journal. So that's a handy crafting tip for using all those extra bits up. And lots of original pieces in here, pages. I'm just loving simple ties in this journal, because they were actually getting too bulky, and I do like to try and leave as much space as I can for personal things. You can actually also use these as a tuck spot, or take them out to use them as collaging. This music paper is so buttery and soft, I love it. I've used Swiss handkerchief snippets, some Swiss lace. This is another cool thing to do. If you have a bigger piece of lace and you don't want to cut it, you can actually fold it over a page and stitch it or glue it. You could also use a stapler as well, so then you're not really losing the whole piece, and you're creating sort of two little tuck spots. So you've got one on that side of the page and also one on that side, so that's kind of fun. Some beautiful French stamps on there. This is a nice big pocket here, and it's got sort of a tulle look to that Swiss lace. This is Marilyn. I think she's gorgeous, and I think her hat is just incredible. I would wonder how heavy that is actually. It looks light because it just has feathers, but you just never know. and the fashionable things that women put up with in those days are quite astounding, I have to say, with corsets and things like that. We really did torture ourselves. Oh, not from the top, but from the side. So that's a nice big lace pocket. And this is some of my favorite antique trim. It's just got little tassels at the bottom. And in the back, there's also a tuck spot as well. So that's sort of the inside of Marilyn, but the other journals are very, very similar, so I won't worry about doing another flip through. This is the cover of Molly, and I've done my little heart stitches on that piece of patchwork, and there's an embroidered doily snippet. That is her spine, beautiful antique fabric actually on the spine. And on the back there's a little snippet from a doily there as well. It's kind of funny, there's two journals that I actually like. I prefer the back than the front. This is one of them. But I just sort of got stuck in putting that like pattern of, so you can sort of see that, you know, that is the same shape and size, and so is that, and then they're the same, and they're the same, and they're the same. So it's the same but different. I think these two are actually exactly the same orientation. And the back, I'll just show you the back very quickly. It's the same for these on the back, so the different patches. And I actually have a template for these, so if you do something like this and it works, just create templates out of the cardboard. And I've just written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, so I know which orientation to sort of put them in, or which order. And what I did was with the actual stitching the patches onto the single piece of fabric, I actually pinned and stitched the spine first. And make sure your fabric is a lot larger than the end journal, because if you use a fabric like I did with an open weave, your pieces tend to move a little bit, so you might think you're being square but you aren't. And then from there I actually sewed zigzag these 3 pieces on, and then I zigzagged these 2 pieces onto these 3 pieces, and then I zigzagged across, if that makes sense. Then on the back I zigzagged that piece on, then I zigzagged those 2 pieces to that piece, and that piece to that piece. And then, so I'll just show you the cover of Molly, and then I'll further explain with Maggie's cover. So Maggie's got the hearts on that piece of fabric. That is an embroidered piece from a tablecloth. This is her beautiful spine, some beautiful vintage fabric. And that's from a doily on the back. This back I actually think I prefer to the front, but yeah, and this is antique fabric here. So with sewing the cover together, once I had sewn all the patches on, I actually sewed a straight stitch all the way around that panel, all the way around the spine, and all the way around that panel, just to hold it all together, if that makes sense. So it's a very well structured cover, and no parts are going to come undone. Once I had done that, then I trimmed the excess fabric off from the inside cover, if that, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. If you're crafty, it probably will. I'm not going to do a tutorial. It's just too difficult for me to coordinate something like that. So hopefully you can get an idea of how I've made the cover. And this one is Maggie, so that's Maggie. And then I've got Molly here and Marilyn. And yeah, I really enjoyed making them actually. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you in my next video. Bye!